back, and today what I'm going to teach you is how to change the oil in your vehicle. What you're going to do before you head off to the parts store to get your oil and your filters, you're going to have to know the year of your vehicle. You're going to have to know the make of the vehicle. You're going to have to know the model number of the vehicle. And you're going to have to know the engine displacement of the vehicle. That's the size of the engine in the vehicle. In this case, it's a 2003 Ford F-150 with a 4.2-liter engine. Okay, you're also going to need to know how much engine oil capacity your engine has. Now, you can find this in your owner's manual under specifications, or you can look it up online for your particular vehicle, make, model, and year, and engine displacement. In this case, it's 6 US quarts, or 5.7 liters of engine oil capacity. You'll also need to know which engine oil filter to buy. You can use the information here to look at a parts store. Sometimes they have those little electronic search catalogs that you can use yourself, or you can ask at the counter. In my case, the oil filter for this particular engine and vehicle is a pH 3600. Now, the other thing you want to know is, you've got the filter figured out, you're going to need to know what grade of oil you use. Oil comes graded for different engines, different applications. In this instance, it's a 5W20 weight oil. Every modern vehicle has the correct weight of oil written on the oil filler cap on the engine. So in this case, as you can see here, it's an SAE 5W20 oil that's required in here, okay? Okay, so once you've determined the oil you need, the weight of oil you need, the appropriate filter that you need, you're going to need an oil filter wrench to remove and install the new filter. And you're going to need some type of wrench to remove the drain plug on the oil pan. You'll also want to have a supply of clean rags and a pair of gloves, and perhaps some plastic gloves for your hands to keep the oil off your hands. Okay, so let's take a look at the initial steps we have to do to get this done. First thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to secure your vehicle on either ramps or up on jack stands so you can access under the vehicle. Now, you don't need both. I just put both of them in here for illustration purposes, but these ramps come pretty cheap and they will hold, I think they're rated at 5,000 pounds per pair. So, I mean, they'll easily hold up the front of most trucks and cars, okay? You just drive up onto them carefully, park when the wheel is in the little hollow here. And, you know, if you block the back wheel like I've done here, you don't need anything fancy. I've just used a piece of firewood in here. But that's going to prevent the vehicle from moving backwards. Same thing there on that side, okay? And like I say, for illustration purposes, I've put the axle stands in there. You don't need both. You can put both if you want, but one or the other. These are sufficient if you block the back wheels, or you can use axle stands, okay? So make sure the vehicle, the primary concern here is to illustrate that you need to make sure that the vehicle is secured, lifted off the ground somewhat so you can get under there and do this work. Okay, once the vehicle's up and secured, what I usually like to do is put something like a tarp down so I'm not laying right on the ground, and I've found this old blanket, and that helps. You know, you can use cardboard if you want, but something to lay on is good under here. What you're going to do when you get under here is you're going to locate a few of these components. Okay, right here I can see this is my oil filter right here. So we're going to look at that in a moment. We're going to look down. We know this is the engine. Got to make sure you're draining the engine oil, not the transmission fluid or some other component's fluid. You want to make sure that you've correctly identified the engine oil drain plug, okay? So once you've found that, position your pan underneath and perhaps even a little farther this way, because what's going to happen when you take the plug out, oil is going to shoot out this way a bit. So if you have it just immediately under here, the pan, it's not going to catch it. So initially the oil is going to shoot out like this a bit. So you want to make sure the pan's in a position to catch it, okay? Once you got everything in place, put on your socket wrench and loosen the drain plug. And then the last few threads you can do by hand, putting some pressure towards the pan, okay? A little bit of pressure in on the threads as you're backing it out. Then now I feel that it's let go completely from the pan, but I'm still holding it inwards. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the plug out of the way in a hurry and let the oil out. Okay, watch this. Okay, see, there it goes. And I've hung on to the bolt, okay? You don't want to lose it down in the oil. It's just another thing to have to dig out of there. Okay, there it is. Now as it starts to just flow straight down, you can move your pan back and get that in the center. Okay. There it is. Now we're just going to let that drain for probably 10 minutes till it's all dripped out of there. Okay. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes or so. The lion's share of that oil has drained into the pan. Okay. And there'll always be a drip or two, but don't worry about that. You've got 99.9% of the oil out of the engine at this point. So what you're going to do now is put your drain plug back in. Now, if you're reusing the old drain plug, make sure you use a new gasket on it. So in this case, I have a new drain plug with a gasket integral to it, so I'm going to use that. So I'm just going to put that in there. Screw it in hand tight, and then I'm going to tighten it with a wrench. Okay, make sure you get that nice and snug. Not too tight, you don't want to over tighten it, but make sure you get that nice and snug, okay? Like that. You don't want that to come out on the highway. Okay, so after the drain plug is tight, take a rag and clean everything around here. Clean under the bottom of the pan, clean around the plug. And there's a reason for that, because once the engine's running, you're going to want to make sure there's no leaks here. And you can check in under here, take a peek under a day or two later. And if you see a nice clean oil pan and a nice clean drip-free plug, you know you've got no leaks, okay? Okay, I've got a trick to make changing an oil filter a lot less messy. And what it is, you take your oil filter wrench, you put it on there, you back it off just a little bit. You don't take it away from the engine. Not too far, okay, just so it's loose, all right? Then what you do is you take your regular zip top bag, okay? And you bag the oil filter, and then you unscrew it through the bag, and what'll happen is the oil that's gonna come out when it's let go from the engine is gonna drip into the bag. I'll demonstrate that here in a second. Okay, so I took the oil filter wrench and I loosened the filter a little bit, and I bagged it with a zip top bag here. Got it up on all sides. Now I'm just gonna bring it off the engine. You see that oil now? It's gonna start running down. And normally that would be running down all over the frame. Let's see, bring it off a little more. Just hold the bag up. All right. Okay, there's the bag, the oil filter in it. There. And there you go. There's the filter and 99% of its oil in the bag. Okay, I'm gonna put that in the pan for now. All I've got to do now is take a clean rag and wipe off the housing. Okay, just like that. Just like that. Okay. Okay, we're ready for the oil filter. Almost. There's a couple of steps I always do on the oil filter. One is I take a Sharpie, I wipe off the oil filter nice and clean, and I write today's date on the oil filter so I know when I changed it. And the other thing I do is I fill the oil filter up with oil. I turn it over and I fill it up with oil, and I will rub a little bit of clean oil on this gasket surface so that it installs well, so it doesn't chatter when it goes around when you tighten it up. By filling up the oil filter before you install it, you buy the engine a couple of extra seconds of lubrication that you wouldn't normally have, because you're trying to avoid a little bit of a dry start. When you fill up an engine with clean oil and you put an empty filter on the engine, if you'll notice when you start it up, there'll be a hesitation, a few seconds, maybe 3, 4, 5 seconds before you get oil pressure showing on the gauge, and that's because the oil filter's got to fill up. But if you fill up the oil filter when you change it with new oil, you've reduced that time. Okay. Okay, I got the oil filter full. And I've taken some of the new oil and rubbed it around that gasket. Okay, now I'm going to put it in. Okay. Okay, and now I'll get the wrench on it and tighten it up a little bit. Now sometimes people say that you should only tighten an oil filter by hand, but sometimes they're slippery and it's hard to get your hand on them. So I'm just going to use the wrench on here gently down near the base. And okay, a little more. It's about 3/4 to 1 turn after the gasket has touched the base up here. So you don't want to go too tight, but like again, you don't want it to come off either. So there, that's about good right there. All right, and then take a rag and wipe it all off. Okay, 2 little checks you need to do before you leave under here. Make sure that you've put the oil drain plug back in the pan and it's nice and snug and it's wiped off clean. Make sure your oil filter's in place and it's snug and you've wiped it off clean. Okay, now we're ready to fill the engine with the oil that it needs. Okay, getting ready to put the oil in. What you're going to want a clean funnel. Okay, make sure it's all wiped out nice and clean. You don't want any grit or particles or dirt to go into that nice clean engine oil. Okay, got a rag, so make sure your funnel's wiped out well. Okay, so we've got our same jug of oil here that we filled up the oil filter with, and we know it started off, this is 5 liters in this jug, and we know, going back to our specs for this engine holds 5.7 liters of oil. When they state capacities for engine oil, it includes the filter. So that's 5.7 liters or 6 quarts will fill this engine to the desired level and the filter itself. Okay, so we are 0.7 of a liter, which is about half a quart short on oil for this fill, but that's fine. What we do is we'll put full 5 liters in here, and once the engine is down on the flat, like off the ramps and everything, and it's run, and we turn it off and we'll leave it sit for probably half an hour, then we'll dip it and see where the level is. Okay, so what I do is when I take the funnel out of the filler, I put a rag under it quickly, hold any drips of oil off the engine. I take my cap, make sure it's clean, put it on the engine. Okay, before we take the truck off the ramps, we're going to gently pull our oil pan out. Careful not to spill it anywhere. I like these pans by Wedco that have a drain built into them, so it's easy to fill up a jug for waste oil recycling right out of these pans. And a handy way to recycle your used oil from the engine is right into the jug that you just used to fill the engine up with new oil from. Okay, so here you go. Just pour gently and slowly, not to overfill it. Notice I put the jug on a piece of cardboard to help catch any drips. There it is. There it is. So what I do is I usually write used on there. That way I'm not going to pour it. I'm not going to pour it into something else. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to start the engine and we're going to back the truck down off the ramps. Let's take this out, wipe it off. And there we are, right on the money. Max level, right there. See that? Okay, so that's how that's done. Thanks for watching.